Hello there. Welcome back to Getting Started with C++ Programming. My name is Richard Snyder, and this is section 4, Loops. In this section, we're going to take a look at defining what a loop is. We'll define a while loop. We'll define a do-while loop. We'll define a for loop, and show an example of nested loops and their advantages. In this video, we'll be taking a look at loops. We'll want to discuss basically what is a loop and its advantages. We need to understand this before we go into the different types of loops. Why loop? That's a very good question. Loops are used to execute one or more statements repeatedly without having to reproduce code multiple times. It's a very efficient way for you to perform a method or function in your code repeatedly and not have to write the same line of code over and over and over again. You don't really want to do this because that ruins the efficiency of code. So let's think of an example. A good example I like to use is when I was a kid. A long time ago, I would try to drive to school, and when driving to school, we'd come up to some train tracks. Sometimes there was a train coming, and when this happened, we really liked to count the train. We'd like to count every single car in the train. So, here's our train. What we would do is we would look at it and count 1, 2, 3, and we would keep counting every single cart in the train until the train finished and left, and everybody would debate about how many carts they had. This is pretty much a good example of a loop. In a loop, it's a good way to count something, and you increment a variable's number one by one and just keep going until you reach the end and then break out of the loop and go on with the code. So think of it this way. A train comes in and you keep counting one cart by one cart as you see it, increment up your variable every single time. When the train has departed, which is the end, you break out of the loop, stop counting, and you continue on with your day. What are advantages to this? Well, again, we reduce the code length. This counting can be a lot. A train could contain hundreds of cars. Because of that, that's a lot of lines of code that can be reduced down to one line of code. You also use less memory. Not as much memory is required to execute the loop because you're only doing it confined into one block. And multiple executions of the same process are contained in one single block of code. It's very efficient and it makes code reading easier and execution better. Let's talk about the parts of loop. First, you have your condition statement. This is your entry point to a loop. This will determine, if true, if you go into the loop and execute the loop block, or if it's false, you skip the loop block entirely and continue on with the program. Inside the loop is the loop block. This is the block of code that will be executed while the condition statement is true. Then you can break the loop or have your break statement. This is pretty much a statement where it tells the program, I'm done with this loop, break out. And it's actually the word break, and we'll use an example of that. However, another way to break is if you were to set the condition statement, change it to a false statement. So when it went back, looped back and checked the condition statement again, you knew that it was going to be false and it would break out of the loop and not loop again. Here's an example of a basic loop. The code comes along and goes into your initial condition statement. It checks it. If the condition is true, the code will go down, execute the body of the loop, and upon finishing, it will go back to the beginning of the loop, which is the condition statement, and recheck. If the condition statement is true, it will follow the same example for an infinite period of time, until that condition statement is proven false. However, once it is proven false, it'll break out, as you can see to the left, and go to the end of the body of the loop, which is outside of the loop, and it'll continue executing the program. There are three main types of loops. There's a while loop, a do-while loop, and a for loop. We'll be going over these in the next sections in more detail.